It's hard to believe, but it's been a year since Corepunk Early Access started. A lot has changed. Hundreds of thousands of hours played, millions of scrags killed, and countless modding droids spawned by the dear boss. Throughout the year, the game has had both highs and lows. I don't want this to be a full review, I'll save that for another time. Instead, I want to highlight the most significant changes and memorable moments from my perspective. This will be quite personal, so feel free to put me on in the background while driving, cooking or falling asleep. Let's remember how it was and dream a little bit about the future. The start was huge. About 70k players turned their attention to Corepunk and decided to play it. Hundreds of players wandered around Goldenfield at that time, trying to find a single red on the field to proceed with the quest line. Early on, someone figured out that it was easier to gain a few levels and go dance with nuts of level 15 or 20 to gain experience that way, rather than trying to outclick other players for the limited number of mobs or items needed for the quest. The Gnats method of getting experience is still valuable, as far as I know, and maybe even more profitable in terms of reaching level 20 faster. Still, quest chains were more engaging than farming mob camps. The chat was full of messages from players looking for a party for Imp Witch. People who decided not to sleep could even already write that they were looking for a party to defeat the androids. Not everything went smoothly in these first weeks. Sometimes, especially in the evenings, it was quite difficult to play the game simply because of server instability. Usually the game would drop you to the main menu after 30 seconds. Sometimes the game wouldn't even let you in. If you made it 15 minutes without being dropped, you won the lottery. Each day, developers updated the community in Discord and tried to bring server stability. But in the end, they had to close the game for a couple of days, which turned into a week. And the wait worth it. The game became far better in terms of server stability. As players started engaging in endgame content, bugs began to surface. The most famous was one that allowed players to obtain many tier 3 artifacts when the dear boss was defeated. Not much time passed before developers noticed it, but it was too late to roll back, so they decided to delete all tier 3 artifacts players had received as drops while keeping those that were crafted or upgraded. But something went wrong. They made a mistake in the code and all tier 3 artifacts were removed from the game, including those players had earned fairly. As I recall, it was a huge disappointment from the community. Many people left at the time simply because the amount of time required to get a single tier 3 artifact wasn't comparable to nowadays. I don't know if you still remember, but vendors in Riverrise didn't have tier 3 recipes at all. Players have to spend dozens of hours to get the recipe, then more hours gathering all the materials for the craft. It was a long time before the marketplace was added to the game. The community's frustration was justified, and still most players stayed and continued to play simply because of this video's title, Early Access. It's a great experience to see the game change almost every day as you play it, but you have to accept bugs, rollbacks, and even occasions like the tier 3 artifact removal. This issue helped developers understand that tier 3 artifacts shouldn't be that hard to get. They brought their recipes to vendors and reduced the power of bosses. At the time, they reduced tier 3 artifact efficiency and made the power of stats equal to tier 2. I also remember not everyone liked this change. But in the end, I think it was a good one. It just wasn't okay to defeat a boss in 20 seconds. Developers made it clear that tier 3 artifacts were never supposed to be that strong initially. Another change around that time was an increase in mana consumption. This also caused confusion in the Discord community since it was another adjustment meant to reduce hero power. This change led to a huge shift in the meta. Players simply stopped using skills. It became a pure attack power and auto-attack meta. And it stayed that way until the passive talent upgrade system, mana siphon talent upgrade, cost reduction secondary star discovery, and a few developer tweaks made it less punishing. But I'll talk about that in more detail later in the video. To finish the recap of the first months, we received more synthesis machine recipes. There were several changes to the loot distribution system. These changes, along with the ones I described earlier, made it easier to get endgame gear overall. Still, looking at this nowadays, the gap between reaching endgame after questing and actually getting endgame gear feels too big, especially for new players. The second major milestone of early access was Prison Island, and at that time it felt like a disaster. Let me explain why. Prison Island was first mentioned in December as content in its final development phase, coming within a couple of weeks. January, February, March, almost every week developers updated the community on their progress. It was presented as something incredible with new details revealed each week. After months of waiting, constant updating Discord and little to do in the endgame at that time, the hype was massive. Like, really massive. And it was bad. Monsters inside Prison Island were too powerful. Their behavior was broken. Players received random one-shots within the first 5 minutes of the dungeon. There were no insurance. People lost their best gear that improved over months. If you didn't use your best gear, you'd sometimes struggle to defeat even a few ordinary mobs. It seemed like only infiltrators felt comfortable inside PI, since they could simply switch on invisibility and farm those chests without combat, which caused major disappointment in Discord regarding fair farming and class balance. To sum up, players expected this content in January, but it was released only in April, and that would be okay if the content were polished and engaging enough. It doesn't matter when, we can wait. What matters most is quality, but we've got what we've got. The developers acknowledged the issue and began working on it. They added an insurance system that let players test each iteration of Prison Island without fear of losing their gear. Mob behavior was reworked and their power was decreased significantly. Prison Island itself was divided into solo duo and 4-man dungeon types. By June, it was truly ready and comfortable to play. Prison Island became the place to get the best gear, recipes and gold. Over time, we received more changes. Insurance cost decreases, PvP insurance removal and restoration, the keycard system, boss heads and gear score limits. Nowadays, I played it almost every day and enjoy it. I've heard from some players that it's become routine, but I don't feel that way simply because I haven't played it that much overall. Prison Island still sparks a lot of discussion about whether a full loot system should exist in a game like Corepunk. Recently, one thread on this topic gained hundreds of comments over just a few days after recent Prison Island changes. The only thing that still disappoints me is that we have 4-man Prison Island, but in reality no one plays it. The first reason is the loot distribution system. The amount of loot that mobs or bosses drop when you defeat them solo equals the amount when you defeat them as a group of 4. Playing as a full party simply isn't profitable if you can clear the same content as a duo or even solo. And this isn't just about Prison Island, it's about all content in Corepunk. Do you remember when we farmed the depot location way before the marketplace and coins were added to the game? It was one of the few places where you could make some gold back then. What killed depot farming, which I personally enjoyed a lot, wasn't the marketplace, coins or Prison Island. It was the loot distribution system. The amount and the quality of loot you received before the change was distributed among all players in a group after it. If you received 2 or 3 skulls from a pack of scrags before, after the change it was split among 3 or 4 party members, depending on the group size. And you might ask, why not farm it solo? It's simply not worth it because it takes too long to kill a single scrag solo. But more importantly, it's just not enjoyable. I can play solo content anytime, but the real joy is in the opportunity to share the farming experience with other players. The distribution system change is definitely a step in the right direction, but somehow the developers forgot or decided not to multiply the amount of loot to match party size. 4-man Prison Island is still suffering because of it. The second reason is the number of mobs in 4-man Prison Island. In my opinion, there are too many of them and they should be reduced by half at least. And the aggro is broken. You can attack a single pack of goblins and within 10 seconds it feels like every goblin on the island wants to join the party. I suspect the mob count was increased because of the distribution system change, an attempt to equalize the loot a player can get in 4-man compared to solo and duo. But it simply shouldn't work like that. To sum up Prison Island, it's now a great activity that brings a lot of joy while playing Corepunk, but I'd be more than happy to see a rework of 4-man Prison Island or improvements to the loot distribution system. Alternatively, Prison Island could remain content for solo and duo players, while the future depot dungeon, which I understand will have a similar system, could be designed for 4-man parties from the start. This way there will be enough variety to satisfy different types of players. During the Prison Island reworks, the marketplace was added to the game. Calling it a huge change would be an understatement. Players had been asking for it since early access started. Developers had planned it for closer to the end of early access, but unexpectedly released it earlier, and it improved the game tremendously. Players began filling it with materials they'd accumulated. The marketplace created opportunities to earn gold without grinding only the most profitable activities. More importantly, you no longer had to wait for other players with materials you need to be online. Just a few clicks and all the necessary materials were in your backpack, ready to craft. The marketplace brought a core MMORPG element to the game, and I'm grateful that developers find the opportunity to prioritize this feature. After the reworked Prison Island was introduced, developers faced massive DDoS attacks. This was especially painful since many players wanted to try the reworked PI. If a player was caught inside PI when a DDoS attack started, the server would disconnect and all the gear could be lost unless insurance was applied, along with items in their backpack and all progress from that PI run. It took developers about 2 weeks to find tools to mitigate these attacks. They even had to close the island for a few days, but in the end, they won the fight and we haven't encountered this problem since. A little bit later, the Prison Island challenge was introduced. Players had to complete certain quest chains related to PI to earn mount skins. Now that the challenge has finished, it left mixed impressions. It was a real challenge and many players who participated enjoyed it, but there were numerous bugs in different parts of it. Sometimes players simply got stuck and couldn't progress further. The problem was that time frames for quests were strictly defined. If a time frame was close to ending and the player got stuck, the only option was to post in Discord, share details about the problem, and hope the developers would fix it and extend the time frame. Another issue was that each quest chain required certain items to drop inside PI. These items had drop chances, and half of those chances were broken. Some were broken for everyone, some were broken for only half of the participants. People could run dozens of islands without the items dropping. I remember that almost every second thread in Discord was about something broken in this challenge. What was created to bring joy to the most hardcore players turned out to be too hardcore. To put it briefly, not everything went smoothly with this challenge, but I hope the developers will learn from these mistakes and the next challenge will go much better. Let's talk about the present. Today I'm writing the script. Arena bosses content is planned for release. At first glance, it may seem like, wait, is this only the second or third piece of content in an entire year if you include the marketplace? And that might seem accurate, but I can criticize here simply because almost every week developers release a patch with different changes to the game, either something new or reworks to the current systems. Enriching synthesis machine recipes, new artifacts, weapons, chips, distribution system, map reworks, a new hero, class reworks, battleground, special talent upgrades, aggro generation system, quest reworks, loot tables. And I could continue, it's not an issue. I just want to highlight that sometimes players judge how the game is doing by how much new content developers release during a certain period of time. And it may be a marker, but from my point of view, developers were focused more on finishing, reworking or enriching current systems to make the game cohesive rather than on new content. From my point of view, it doesn't matter how much endgame content the game has if the core of the game isn't working well towards a potential great player experience. And I'm happy that developers focus on long-term player engagement rather than a few weeks of engagement because of new endgame content. But I don't want to seem like I don't see the problems with new content. It's not about how unfinished or broken it may be, not about its scarcity, no. The developers are simply not as experienced as other studios might be, and that's totally okay. What matters more is how you react on your failures. Usually people point to the quality of communication from developers or an incomplete vision of how the game should look in the end. A lot has been said already about these issues, so I'd like to talk about what I personally don't understand and don't welcome. It's the developers' constant desire to tell people to expect certain content at a certain time. And you may ask, so what's wrong with that? It's totally okay to let people prepare in advance and push the hype train. The problem is that they miss these time frames most of the time. And I can explain it simply. They may not be experienced enough to estimate the potential amount of work and the potential number of bugs to fix before the content is ready. But they continue to miss the timeframes and still set expectations about certain dates, weeks and months like they don't see a problem here. I see it this way. Setting a certain expectations about dates for new content and not meeting them most of the time simply creates a feeling of inflated expectations. Doing this again and again spread this feeling and start to affect more and more players. Let's remember how it started. At or shortly after the start of early access, they planned 6 new heroes, 2 battlegrounds, PvE instances and active abilities on artifacts and weapons. In December, they planned to release Prison Island in a few weeks. In June, they planned to release PvP arenas, weapon talents, runes, boss arenas, battlegrounds and rework depot by August-September. In the end, regarding classes, we only got champion in March. Prison Island came in March instead of January, but a truly playable and enjoyable Prison Island didn't arrive until June. We've got arenas, weapon talents and battlegrounds. Boss arenas content is releasing these days, but no runes or rework depot. And it's November, with the release was initially planned by the end of the year. Again, postponing the release isn't a problem. Overestimating yourself isn't a problem either. Yes, it's better to wait a few months and play boss arenas comfortably than to play it at 10 FPS because the particle system isn't optimized. I'm totally okay with that and I understand it completely. But why announce expected timeframes for future content if you know there is a high chance you won't meet them? All you'll have is inflated expectations in the community because of yet another postponement. And this isn't real criticism, it's hard to criticize when you've never been a game developer. It's more like pure curiosity from me. Why? Why do it again and again? What's the benefit? Are these artificial deadlines created to push the developers themselves harder to release new content? So it doesn't end up like Escape from Tarkov. No timeframes, no promises, rare communication with the community, just 2 wipes a year and the statements that the game will be released tomorrow. As a result, that game has been in early access for about 7 years. If this is the reason to set expectations, maybe not for players but for yourselves as developers, then I'm totally okay with it and understand it. Otherwise, I don't have any other guess. If you do, share it in the comments. It would be nice to read your view on this. I'd like to finish on something positive. The game deserves it. The game plays really well. I play it almost every day, making content and streaming, and I simply enjoy it. Whether I'm gathering, crafting, struggling with a rare level 10 keycard, trying to heal as much as possible in battlegrounds, or trying the new boss arenas, it's fun. The developers seem to be trying their best to make this experience joyful. Maybe not everything goes as they plan, but they try. And maybe that's enough for me. The game runs smoothly after all the server optimizations, especially after the particle and graphics system reworks. I hope the game continues to thrive and the future looks bright to me. I could say way more about this year, I'm pretty sure I missed something, but this video is already very long. If you look at it as a small podcast, though, it works better. I tried to cover the most and least significant moments of the year and share my thoughts. If you agree or disagree with something or simply want to add something, let's discuss it in the comments. If you've listened this far, thank you very much for your time and see you in the next video.